Chapter 9. Despite Balashi's fears, they arrived home that night without incident. "Thank Enki that they judged you fool enough that it would be a waste of their time to kill you," Balashi said. "I thought that you had tired of life when you challenged the old woman just before we left. Have you no sense in your head whatsoever? What demon whispered in your ear that Akala would bow to the wishes of the pretty little bird she keeps locked in a silver cage?" A fey mood took me," Amon admitted. "I didn't think so much as hope that something could be done to undo her decree that I should never see Iltani again." Balashi moved on to his other foolish decision. "And did your fey mood tell you to anger Tirigan as well? Why did you bait him when a few easy answers which you had already prepared beforehand would likely have been sufficient to allay his suspicions?" "You know I don't take well to bullies who think they have the right to dictate to me," Amon replied. "The Prince of Eridu might have had the luxury of baiting any bully who annoyed him, but young Itana, the olive farmer, would know that when dealing with the powerful, it is best to attract as little attention as possible," Balashi said. "Did I not warn you several times that playing games with powerful people is dangerous? Now that you've tried your hand at it and lost, perhaps you will take me more seriously in the future." "Lost?" replied Amon angrily. "I have lost nothing. The game is not yet begun, Balashi." "Oh?" Balashi replied. "Were you at a different feast than the one I attended? At your feast, was there a different Akala, one who didn't forbid you to see your girlfriend ever again?" Amon snorted. "What are the words of a mummified old grandmother to me? She can rant and rage all she likes, but her words are just wind." Balashi was amazed at Amon's density. "If you go to the temple against her wishes, I think you will find that her words carry more weight than the wind. The temple guard will toss you out on your ear if they don't beat you and maim you to teach you a lesson." "Inanna will make a path," Amon said stubbornly. "Oh, Ishtar, can you hear yourself? You sound like a fool. Inanna will make a way is the same as saying I have no plan and no clue. Are you so lovesick that you've lost all logic, or is there still a chance that we can reason together like men?" Balashi demanded. Amon took a deep breath and tried to calm down. He was right. Inanna will make a way was not a plan. "Okay, let us reason together like men. The goal is to get Iltani out of the temple, and then I suppose we shall have to flee Uruk. We can go onto a card like we planned," Amon enumerated. "I seem to recall that the plan was to make allies and win back your kingdom, not rescue some poor lonely priestess," Balashi said reasonably. "It is essential to make plans, but the general who cannot modify his plans in the face of tactical reality is doomed," Amon responded. "Your cleverness will be the death of you," Balashi snapped. "Throwing my words back in my face will not change the reality of the situation." "And what reality is that?" Amon wanted to know. "I don't think you're in a mental state to hear the reality, but if you believe that you are disciplined enough to listen, tell me, and I will lay them out before you," Balashi challenged. "Just because you're older than me, your opinions are not magically transformed into truths, but I will listen to what you have to say and I will decide for myself if what you say has merit," Amon replied, making an effort to keep the heat out of his voice. "Fair enough," Balashi said. "Let us begin with the most basic truths. We have been in Uruk less than a fortnight. You met the High Priestess only a few days ago. You barely know the girl, and yet you're making decisions that may cost you your life based on a handful of conversations." "I agree with what you say, but I don't agree with what you imply," Amon said. Balashi held up a hand, asking for patience. "No need to discuss what I imply. Give me a moment and I will say what I think clearly. The High Priestess is unhappy. She has been at the temple all of her life. Presumably, she has little experience of even the rest of the city of Uruk. She yearns to be free of her restraints, though she cannot know what such freedom would mean for her, and she believes she has uncovered some evil plot which she thinks she may know how to remedy in some fashion." "What you say is essentially true," Amon allowed. "Well and good," said Balashi. "Now let us talk of the things that I believe you have not considered in all of your romantic planning to steal away the High Priestess from the temple and foil the nameless evil." "I cannot restrain my eagerness to hear your great wisdom," Amon said sarcastically. "What is it that I should have considered which your far-seeing eyes have perceived?" Let us suppose, for a moment, that you sneak into the temple, rescue the High Priestess from the evil clutches of the jealous old hag, and return here to our apartment. What happens then?
Then we go on to Akkad, enlist the aid of the Emperor, retake Eridu, put down the conspiracy in Uruk, I take Yiltani as my bride, and I make you the captain of my guard,
Amon replied evenly. Very nice of you to remember my service and make me captain of the guard, Balashi said sarcastically.
You're welcome,
Amon replied with a beneficent smile. And during all of the time that these grand plans are unfolding, what shall we eat, where shall we sleep, and what shall we wear? Balashi asked agreeably.
We'll live off the land, as we did when we travelled from Eridu to Uruk,
Amon answered. And your girlfriend, has she often slept on the hard ground, endured hunger and thirst as necessary, hunted and killed and walked many days without rest? Balashi wondered. She would happily travel in the company of a man and boy she scarcely knows out into the wilds. That brought Amon up short. From the time he was small, he had gone hunting with his father, and he loved to be outdoors. He and father had been absent from the palace for 10 days at a time, chasing antelope or wild pigs. Even so, he had done a fair share of grumbling at the privations he had suffered on many of these short trips. Have you nothing to say? Prompted Balashi.
How long do you think it will take us to reach Akkad from here?
Amon asked. You've made the trip more times than I, Balashi replied. How far is it, and what is the land like between here and there?
Travelling in a caravan it takes more than a week, Amon said. Along the great rivers there is game enough, but crossing from one river to the next, there are some desert stretches. If we stick to the towns, it will be easy enough.
Yes, the fugitive High Priestess of Uruk, the deposed Prince of Eridu, and the faithful bodyguard, inconspicuously making their way from town to town with no shekels and no friends. That ought to work out fine, Balashi said ironically.
I suppose we will need some shekels,
Amon agreed.
But that's not so hard as you seem to think. The High Priestess surely has jewels and silver which she might lay her hands on when we escape. You saw what she was wearing tonight.
Shekels will help, but they will not be sufficient in and of themselves. Not every city of the plains is like Uruk. Outsiders are not welcomed in many places, Balashi explained. Perhaps you should consider an alternative plan.
I'm listening, said Amon.
The High Priestess is lonely, but she lives a life of luxury. After the celebration of the fertility festival at the new year, she will likely have a son or daughter to keep her company and occupy her time. She will also no longer be High Priestess, and she will not be so constrained as she is now. She will have a good life, and she will forget her loneliness. Amon's eyes were getting larger and larger, and he appeared about to suffer an apoplexy.
What do you mean she'll have a son or daughter? The fertility festival involves wearing flowers and dancing, not well, you know. And how will she not be the High Priestess anymore? Isn't she High Priestess for life?
Balashi shook his head. Do you think that the entire world is Eridu, and that all of the festivals are the Festival of Enki? In Uruk, as in many other places, the king and the High Priestess enact the fertility rites to ensure prosperity for the city. If the union is blessed with a child, it is a sign of Ishtar's favor, and the whole city rejoices. Why do you think that such a young and attractive girl was chosen as the High Priestess? The king ensures that it is so. How would these rites work if it was the same High Priestess every year? Could she be expected to bear a child year after year and thereby ensure the continuing favor of the goddess? The longer Balashi's explanation continued, the more horrified Amon became. He had known that customs differed from city to city and town to town. Each place had their own patron god, and even the same god might be worshipped in very different ways in each different place. But this way of worshipping Inanna was entirely foreign to him. He had known about the sacred hierodules in the temple, but he had convinced himself that what they did had nothing whatever to do with Yiltani. My point, Balashi said, breaking into Amon's thoughts, is that if you simply leave the High Priestess alone, in a short time, a year or two at most, her life will be much better than it is now. She will remember you with fondness as a brash young hero who made her heart beat faster with excitement, but she will be glad that she remained in the temple after all. In a few months at most, some other pretty young girl will catch your eye. She will be much more suitable for you. To woo and win her, you won't have to risk your life, and you will be happier with her and the many fine sons she will bear you than with a stolen High Priestess.
Amon wanted to say something, but he didn't know quite what. Balashi was very effectively demolishing the romantic visions he had built up in his head. His dreams were slipping like sand through his fingers, and he did not know how to salvage them before they were entirely gone. "You're young," Balashi said. "And that means you're impatient and impulsive. Everything feels like a matter of life and death, but it is simply not so, not if you keep a level head. I know what it's like, I was young once myself. But after your first infatuation you go on and you feel love again, and it's different each time. And you learn that maybe it is better to be careful, that maybe you don't need to dive into things without heed for the consequences." Amon felt that, although everything Balashi was saying made sense, there was something profoundly wrong. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he felt that there was something he was leaving out of his rational, calculating approach to things. "But I swore to her by the Seven that I would protect her and that I would do everything within my power to help her," he protested. "It is a credit to you that you want to help her, but yours is not the first oath sworn in haste to a pretty girl. The gods will understand if you act for both her interest and yours," Balashi affirmed. Suddenly, Amon saw the hole in Balashi's argument, and he pounced. "Is it in your own best interest to stick with me?" Amon asked. "What do you mean?" Balashi asked, caught off balance by the question. "By remaining faithful to your oath, you've put yourself in mortal danger. You could have left me when the assassins invaded the palace or at any time since. It would have been the logical thing to do. It's still the logical thing to do, so why are you still here?" Amon asked. Balashi was quiet for a long time. "I hadn't thought of it that way," he admitted. "I suppose I stay loyal to my oath because it feels like the right thing to do, and because, despite your many shortcomings, I have developed a certain fondness for you, like a master for a misshapen three-legged dog." "What you're describing is love," Amon said. "No, I said fondness, not love," Balashi replied. "And I know where you're going with this, and it's not the same. I've cared for you and guarded you for 17 years. You've known this high priestess for just a few days." "A few days, yes, but with a feeling so intense that it feels like nearly a month," Amon joked. His good humor was returning, now that he had found a way out of the philosophical trap Balashi had laid for him. "Don't try to tell me that decades of loyalty, care, and yes, if I must say it, love, are the same as a few days of two kids fluttering their eyes at each other," Balashi said heatedly. "Peace, Balashi," Amon replied. "Was it not you who began this conversation, warning me against excessive passion, asking me to be disciplined and listen to reason? I ask the same of you now. Hear me out, before you grow so angry that you shut your ears." Balashi took a deep breath and made a visible effort to calm himself. "It has always been difficult for me to sit still while idiocy is discussed seriously," Balashi said. "But I am calmer now, and I await eagerly the great wisdom which you have to impart." This last he said with great sarcasm, and with a poor attempt at copying the teenage whine Amon sometimes put into his voice. "First," Amon said seriously, "you need to work a lot harder on your imitation of me. I sound nothing like that at all. Second, you say that the love you bear me is nothing at all like the love that I bear for Iltani. I say that they are the same, in the way that a mighty oak and a small sapling are the same. The one is an example of what the other may become, given time and care. You would have me pluck up the sapling and throw it away. You say this because you claim to know the flavor of the fruit that this tree will bear once it has grown. I say that no one knows the fruit that this tree might produce, and that, if only I take proper care, the fruit will most certainly be good." Balashi was dismissive. "I don't care if your lovely little tree will produce the fruit of life and grant you immortality. If you get killed by the gardener when you put your little sapling in a pot and try to carry it off, it makes no difference how delicious the fruit might one day have been. That is why I need you, great general, to help me plan the tactics to defeat the gardener and carry off the sapling," Amon replied. "Don't fight this battle," Balashi said without hesitation. "If I am your general, listen to me when I tell you that this is a fight you will regret in the end." Amon nodded. "I understand why you feel that way, but if heroes did not sometimes fight the hard battles, no one would ever bother to make songs about them. It is the battle against impossible odds that makes the song worth singing." Balashi snorted derisively.
If the minstrels made songs about the 59 fools who fought battles against impossible odds and died ignominiously, rather than the 60th who, to make the gods laugh, was allowed to triumph, young muttonheads like you would not be so eager to imitate them.
You keep telling me how impossible this is, Amon objected. But you honestly don't know how big the risk is. Playing the games of the powerful is dangerous, but just as there are good soldiers and poor soldiers, among the powerful there are those who are clever and those that are fools. For all we know, this temple council may be completely incompetent at playing this game.
Fools don't often live to become rich and powerful, Balashi warned. If you're suggesting that perhaps you are far more clever than all of them put together, well, don't ask me to bet any shekels on that.
And yet they're not gods, Amon said. They are men, and they have weaknesses. All we need to do is discover what weaknesses we can exploit, and this impossible task may become easy.
Oh, is that all? Why don't we just do that then? Balashi replied sarcastically.
That is exactly what we shall do, Amon agreed. So, if you will stop fighting against me and doing the work of our enemies by trying to discourage me, we can focus on our efforts on how to succeed.
Balashi released a pent-up breath. Fine, he snapped. I will pray that the gods may find your silly antics amusing enough that they will let us succeed, so that they may have something to laugh at as they sit around chatting after a feast. I can see no other way that we can possibly succeed otherwise.
Fortunately for you, my brave general, Amon said with a smile, your part in the plan is to do nothing, at least for now. You said that we need to develop our resources, and I agree. You will continue to work for your lord, and you and I will live simply. We will save up as many shekels as we can against the time when we will flee to Akkad. Meanwhile, I'll redouble my efforts to find allies here in Uruk. We may be certain that the Temple Council has enemies here, and I will seek them out, and I will have their aid in carrying out my plan.
What a fantastic notion, Balashi replied. Where have I heard that idea before? Oh, that's right, when your avowed plan was to win back your kingdom as soon as possible. And what have we to show for our time here in Uruk? That's right, no new allies and a powerful group of potential new enemies.
I wouldn't say no new allies, Amon objected. The High Priestess of Inanna is on our side.
Great. If you continue this approach, a year hence we will have an army, consisting of a 3-legged dog, a pox-covered beggar, and a powerless figurehead, and our enemies will have all the gods and 10,000 demons besides to fight against us, Balashi said sarcastically. I don't suppose that while you look for these new allies you seem to think exist, that you would consider avoiding further antagonizing the Temple Council? They have dismissed you as irrelevant to their machinations, and we want to do nothing to change their minds.
Amazingly, despite all your ill-considered sarcasm, you occasionally give good counsel, Amon agreed. I will not antagonize the Temple Council, but I must find some way to communicate with Iltani. If this plan is to succeed, she will need to know her part in it, and it may be that the quickest way to get the information I need will be to get it directly from her.
That's a bad idea, Balashi said. If you show up nosing around the temple, you risk arousing their suspicions.
Not if they believe that I've gone back to Eridu, Amon said. I'll go to the temple tomorrow and beg a guard or priestess to take a message to Iltani. I'll tell them that I'm returning home, and if they care enough to send a spy to follow me, they'll see me leave.
If this hypothetical spy you mention watches you saunter out of the gate of the city and then 100 yards later circle back and return to Uruk, I warrant you can expect to find an assassin waiting for you in your bed the next night, Balashi argued.
I had thought to continue down the road somewhat more than 100 yards, Amon replied dryly. But you may be right. Do you think them interested enough to send a spy to follow me all the way back to Eridu?
They were interested enough to invite you and me to dinner at the temple, and to assign 4 different spies to try to suck information out of us like a swarm of starved mosquitoes, Balashi answered.
4 spies? Amon asked, surprised. Who?
Balashi held up one finger. Tiragan was the most obvious of them. Clearly, he was sent to ask the questions you expected, and to either make them appear incompetent in their straightforward interrogation, or else to frighten you off with threats.
Amon nodded. That had been his conclusion as well.
Balashi raised a second finger. Dongi was slightly more skilled. Warning you against Akala and giving you paternal business advice was a deft touch, but he didn't count on you being such a muttonhead that you would miss his discreet hints that he could help you in your business, so he had to become more ham-handed in his approach. Amon nodded again. He had involuntarily responded positively to Dungi's indications that he was on Amon's side. Balashi raised a third finger. The woman next to me, who chatted incessantly and constantly made small indications that she found me attractive and would like to get to know me better, was more skilled yet than either of the other two.
Skilled enough to convince you to see her again? Amon wondered.
It would raise suspicions if I didn't show a certain amount of interest in her, Balashi asserted. She's witty and attractive, and an old discarded retainer with few options would be a fool not to follow up on her hints that she could lead me to better employment.
Amon grinned knowingly, and Balashi gave him a half-hearted whack on the top of his head.
I don't like what you seem to be insinuating with your idiot grin, he growled.
What? I didn't say anything, Amon protested.
You don't have to say anything, you insolent pup, Balashi said. Holding up a fourth finger, he continued. I judge the most skillful of the bunch to be the nearly invisible serving girl, who clearly didn't miss a look, a gesture, or a wink all night.
Amon tried to think which serving girl he was talking about, and could not call her to mind. Did she see you stomp on my foot? Amon asked.
I hope not, Balashi answered seriously. I waited until she was in the kitchen fetching food before I called your attention to your incredibly poor acting job. But there may have been, and probably were, other servants paying close attention. If so, I can only hope that they interpreted my love taps as something else.
So, you think that I will be followed if I go to Eridu? Amon summarized.
I think that you'll be followed wherever you go, at least for a short time, Balashi confirmed.
Amon sat silently, digesting the implications of that for a time. At last, he said, If I am to be followed no matter what, then perhaps I should do what I may to allay their suspicions. I'll go to Eridu, strengthen my disguise, find out what I may of the activities of my enemies, and see what I can discover of the situation of my friends.
Absolutely not, Balashi said sternly. Do you not recall our reasons for leaving? Which of those reasons have changed in the brief time we've been here?
The reasons have not changed, but my understanding of them has, Amon replied determinedly. Many nights my thoughts have been troubled by my over-hasty flight from Eridu. I don't know for sure that my father is dead. All we know is from a single brief conversation with a guard who was rushing into battle. We have no knowledge of my mother at all. If she is held against her will by that snake Lipetenki, I would know of it.
Amon did not say that if such were the case, he would most certainly take action to remedy the situation. He didn't want to give Balashi cause to worry, nor to oppose the plan that was swiftly beginning to take shape in his mind.
You yourself know the dire need we have for shekels. If my uncle, or perhaps old Mataki, have survived Lipetenki's ascension to the throne with their fortunes intact, I am sure that they will agree to loan me enough for our trip to Akkad.
Hold on, Balashi said. Lipetenki knows that he has not killed you, and he will have spies out watching for you.
But will they be watching for a slave helping Zuzu make deliveries? They'll never expect me to disguise myself as a slave, and working for Zuzu will be the perfect cover to allow me to move unnoticed all across Eridu, Amon continued.
A perfect disguise, so long as good old Zuzu decides not to enrich himself by selling your head to Lipetenki, Balashi argued. You've fallen in love with a girl you barely know after a few days, so why not entrust your life to a man you barely know too? Makes perfect sense.
You've made me realize something, Amon responded. Something that must inform all of my plans from here on out. I cannot be too afraid to take risks, or I may as well become a servant to some minor lord and renounce all of my plans and content myself to look for no greater success than to marry a plain, brainless girl who will give me a few sons.
Balashi's response was more heated than Amon had anticipated. Perhaps his description of failure came too close to Balashi's dreams of success to be comfortable for either of them. Many a better man than you has contented himself with such ambitions as you dismiss out of hand, he said angrily.
I don't doubt it, Amon responded, restraining the temptation to reply with an insult. But I am beginning to understand something of my destiny. I feel in my heart that my life is to be like a falling star. It may be so brief and dim that no man even notices it, or it may be so bright and brilliant that all of the inhabitants of the earth watch it make its glowing trail across the sky.
Balashi snorted. You say things like that to ensure that the gods will howl with laughter when they determine your destiny.
Better to be laughed at by the gods than ignored completely, Amon replied.
The key to a good life is to be completely ignored by the gods and any men who have god-sized ambitions, Balashi responded. Your overweening pride puts me in mind of Gilgamesh.
That ridiculous story? Amon groaned. Gilgamesh was a wicked tyrant. Come to think of it, that seems to be something of a theme with Uruk. They have a long history of poor leadership. If my outsized pride is to put you in mind of any specific hero, why not Enkidu? I far prefer him, the powerful hero the gods created to end Gilgamesh's reign of terror, to the petty tyrant of Uruk.
How fitting, Balashi said. Gilgamesh had a troubling dream of a falling star, which his mother revealed to him was Enkidu. The king of Uruk ended up convincing Enkidu to join him in his adventures. Why don't you ask Inanna to send the king of Uruk as your comrade to help you retake Eridu? I'm sure he will quickly take up your cause. Being brother kings, you already have a lot in common. Come to think of it, you both have lascivious intentions toward the high priestess of Inanna too. You will, no doubt, get along swimmingly. Amon was not the least bit amused by Balashi's comparisons, so he chose not to answer. When he continued stony-faced, Balashi stood and blew out the lone lamp that had been burning throughout all of their discussion. Lie down and go to sleep, little prince. You have a lot of work to do if you want to get yourself ignominiously murdered by your enemies tomorrow, Balashi said. I'm not going to get murdered. I'll be perfectly safe. I have more to worry for you coming to some harm in the clutches of your new girlfriend than I have for my own safety, Amon replied. I might like it in the clutches of my new girlfriend, Balashi quipped. Too bad I won't be able to stick around and find out. I don't know how I'm going to explain to the chief steward that I need to leave to Eridu on the morrow and don't know when I'll be back. That should be an easy conversation, Amon said. Since you won't be having it, you're not coming with me. What do you mean by that, little princeling? Balashi asked. You know that we need the money you're earning if we are to have any chance of success, Amon said reasonably. We can't count on me receiving aid in Eridu. There are too many things we don't know. Besides, we need to be about the work of figuring out the politics of this city. I need to find out who I might be able to approach as my allies. I can't do it myself since I'll be in Eridu. Maybe you will so overwhelm your new girlfriend with passion that she'll tell you all that we need to know. But one of us needs to remain here. Balashi thought about that for a while. It made some sense, but it felt wrong for him to allow the prince out of his sight for more than a day. No, I don't like it, Balashi said. You can't be trusted on your own. You're too impulsive and you don't think things through. You're as likely to get yourself killed as you are to do anything useful in Eridu. Okay, tell me another plan that has as much chance of success as this one, Amon challenged. March into the temple, invite Akala to duel in single combat for the hand of your girlfriend. Then after you defeat her, go to the king of Uruk and demand the loan of his army, Balashi suggested. Sounds like a great idea, said Amon. I'll do that. You'll have as much chance of success, Balashi replied. And it has the advantage of simplicity. You know what? Amon said. I'm going to go with my plan, and in my plan, you have to stay in Uruk. I wish it were otherwise, but anything else may make our later plans unworkable. Balashi didn't answer. He wasn't made for a life of uncertainty and constant moving from place to place. He liked stability. Leaving Eridu had been very hard on him, and he didn't think he could easily bring himself to leave Uruk just when things for him were getting started. He worried for what would become of Amon without his steadying presence, but sooner or later, the prince was going to shrug off his influence and make his own path anyway. Tomorrow seemed like as good a time as any. A few minutes later, Balashi's voice sounded contemplatively in the quiet room. You know, if you had just listened to me and refused to fall in love with that girl, your life and mine would be a whole lot less complicated, he said. To be fair, Amon replied, I had already fallen in love with her by the time you warned me against it. I felt an invisible hand guiding me to her from the moment I entered the temple. I think I fell in love with her the first moment I saw her. Balashi laughed, a deep, rumbling belly laugh. That's what you told Akala. When you said it to her, you knew that you were lying. The largest step to perdition you can possibly make is when you start believing your own lies. Think on that, little princeling.
Amon rolled over on his pallet and tried to remember what he had actually felt the first time he had seen Iltani, but found that he couldn't do it. Everything that had come before was coloured by what happened later. He wondered if what Balashi had said about perdition were true, but as he drifted off to sleep, he decided that he preferred to see everything associated with his beloved in the best possible light. He imagined that he could still feel the imprint from where her lips had been so fiercely pressed against his. If the gods had not truly led them to find each other, they ought to have.